Byju Raveendran and the turmoil at BYJU'S. Karthik Malhotra here with me. Karthik, BYJU'S a story that is as it was, continues to be more news flow. But I think the biggest shocker of them all is the fact that the valuation has now been cut down by almost 99%. $22 billion to $1 billion, and now at the current float it is about $250 million. That is what Byju Raveendran has also accepted in his letter to shareholders. What is needed at this point in time is to raise capital, and he is bloody but he is unbowed.
Yeah, Shweta, I think we have discussed and there has been enough written and enough said about the mess at BYJU'S, and there is absolutely no respite, and there's unlikely to be any respite for Byju Raveendran and for BYJU'S, the edtech giant as it once were. $22.8 billion peak valuation in 2021. The company and the country and the world coming out of COVID, reduced number of students wanting to continue with online education. One thing leading to another. Overall, it became a fairly grim situation where there were multiple battles that Byju Raveendran was fighting and continues to fight. I think lead among them was the $1.2 billion loan, which thus far remains unpaid. This was a loan that Byju Raveendran and BYJU'S Think and Learn, the parent company, had taken from foreign lenders in the year 2021 in a bid to acquire some assets. Those assets also continue to be on the block for sale, haven't really seen any headway when it comes to Byju getting rid of those assets. I'm talking about Epic and Great Learning. Now, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen these foreign lenders that BYJU'S owes $1.2 billion to has knocked on the doors of NCLT and asking for a resolution. At the same time, there was obviously this entire news flow of which first began with markdown. So if you remember, it was first marked down from $22.8 billion to about $8 billion. Then Prosos, knocked it down to about $5.5 billion. Then the news came that we are looking at a $2 billion valuation. Then we were looking at a $1 billion valuation. And right now, by way of rights issue, remember, rights issue is when the company decides to let the existing shareholders participate in getting the rights to own securities or shares of the company at a discounted value. So this is a rights issue. This is not exactly a fresh fundraise. It's a rights issue where existing stakeholders, shareholders, have the right to buy additional share capital in Think and Learn in the parent organization at a discounted price. So this discounted price is about $225 to $230 million or $250 million or so. And BYJU'S is looking at raising about $200 million and raising this $200 million to meet the immediate obligations. Now, what are these
obligations?
Right. So I think these immediate obligations obviously are continuing by way of paying salaries to employees, continuing by retaining whatever limited office spaces they have available after all those offices across the country which were shut down, and just keeping business running, business ticking one way or another. So I think, we've seen enough melodramatic sessions by Byju Raveendran, some in person, some by way of his writings. And if you remember, even when the results for the separate, not the parent company, not the consolidated, but the standalone numbers for Think and Learn came out, there was this melodramatic letter which was written by Byju Raveendran to employees and to shareholders, suggesting that that he is pretty much, in the armory, he is a war soldier and he's fighting these multiple battles on all fronts. One of them we've spoken about was a $1.2 billion loan. Then there was this FEMA investigation by ED on whether there was misappropriation of funds, money laundering, which Byju Raveendran stuck his neck out and said there hasn't been any. Then in addition to that, we are obviously looking at these operational costs, mounting, and BYJU'S not having enough cash flow to be able to, pay off those obligations on a month-on-month basis. And finally, I think it also reached a point when Byju Raveendran and his wife Divya Gokulnath had to pledge their own assets, mortgage their own assets, their own homes, to raise some capital, to raise some debt, to be able to keep the operational expenses going. So in his letter, Byju Raveendran has said that the promoters of Think and Learn have pledged as much as $1.1 billion, have infused $1.1 billion of their own wealth to keep the business going. Now, the point is, why did they have $1.1 billion in the first place? If the business was not doing well, did, as founders, they have enough right to make that much money themselves and continue raising funds on a business which did not see enough sunshine?
Absolutely. So I think the bigger question at this point in time, anybody who's tracking the Byju's story, now that the financial results are out and we know what is happening at Byju's, there's a fresh fundraise, not fresh, albeit from existing.
It's a rights issue.
It's a rights issue, from existing investors. What happens here on for Byju's? If the Byju's as a company, what are the future prospects looking like after this fundraise? What should be their priority areas?
You know, it's very tough to say, Shweta. I think priority areas right now for the company per se and for the founder Byju Raveendran has to be at least operational profitability. So in his letter to shareholders, Byju Raveendran, while he is quoting Willian Ernest, Henley, and making these lofty statements that his head is bloody but unbowed, I think he's also very clearly mentioned in that same letter to employees and shareholders that the company is looking at operational profitability within a quarter. The letter clearly says that they're just 1 quarter away from operational profitability.
Right.
So is this operational profitability at a particular company level? Is it a consolidated level? We don't know, because the data that we've seen coming out is of FY22. The consolidated results that came out for FY22, remember, almost 18 months too late, are suggesting that losses in the company have doubled from about 4,600 crore rupees to almost 8,000 crore rupees. Whereas in the same time, revenue has grown from about 3,000 odd crore rupees to 5,000 crore rupees. So you're looking at a P&L statement where revenue, the top line of the company, is about half the size of the losses. So obviously FY22 was a complete washout here when it comes to the finances of Byju's. But remember, FY22 is the period between April 2021 and March 2022. Now, this is the time when people had not completely ditched online learning. The trouble, to my mind, would have really begun in the next year. So FY23, those results are elusive. We have not seen those results, take any shape, any form. They haven't been released. I don't think they've been audited as well. The deadline that Byju Raveendran had set himself was that by the 31st of December 2023, FY23 results would also be presented. They have not been presented. So we don't know what are the ghosts and what are the skeletons in the closets of the books of FY23. But when those results come out, my fear is that we will see much larger losses and we will see a slower growth in revenue. So it is going to spell even more trouble for Byju Raveendran. I think the choices are fairly clear right now for the company, and the first priority of shareholders should be to ensure that Byju Raveendran steps aside. There should be somebody not muddled in his head with these issues and being embroiled in these issues firsthand, and really have professionals come into the company, take charge. We've seen Arjun Mohan, the new CEO, and there are some drastic measures that have been taken, cost cutting not being the least among them. 5,000 people have been laid off. But I think somebody needs to look at this company very dispassionately, take a step back, take a 35,000 feet view and address the issues, face these issues, take some very, very hard decisions, shut down certain businesses if required, and not let the founders and their emotions come in the way. And these emotions are rampant in the addresses written and spoken in the company. I think emotions need to be kept aside. Take a dispassionate view of the company and take all the necessary steps to bring it back or shut it down.
Absolutely. So I think perhaps time now for Byju Raveendran to step aside. At least that is what stakeholders should be vying for right now. But Byju's as a story continues to be developing day after day. In a latest that we now know, there is a fresh issue by virtue of which Byju Raveendran is now hoping to get more funds to keep business running. There is a problem with, of course, profitability, but Byju Raveendran confident that within the next quarter, profitability will be achieved.